It was just another workday for Beverly Carter, a dedicated real estate agent. She had one last house to show, a quiet property located outside of town. The client had indicated he was ready to pay in cash, which made it seem like an easy sale. Before heading in, Beverly called her husband Carl to let him know she would be home soon. However, she never returned. Her car was found parked in the driveway, her purse still inside, and the house was open, but Beverly was nowhere to be found. The events of that evening shocked her family and her community. Beverly Carter was born in 1963 in the small city of Anniston, Alabama. From an early age, she carried herself with an energy that hinted at the resilience and strength she would later be known for. By the time she turned 16, she was already working as a waitress, ambitious, determined, and eager to build something more for herself. It was during this time that she met Carl Carter, a young man 3 years her senior. Their relationship moved quickly, and before long they were married. However, life as newlyweds was far from perfect. In the early stages of their marriage, Beverly faced troubling challenges. On one occasion, while Carl was driving under the influence with Beverly in the passenger seat, the situation escalated. When she asked him to stop the car because of his reckless driving, he lashed out violently. It was a moment that could have ended everything, but Beverly chose to stay. Not long after that incident, she discovered that Carl had been unfaithful. The betrayal was undeniable, and the emotional weight of it could have broken her spirit. But again, she made the difficult decision to stay. She believed in second chances, and in time, her perseverance seemed to pay off. Their relationship began to heal. The couple moved to a quiet rural town called Scott, Arkansas. Life slowed down there, and the Carters began to put down roots. They would go on to have 3 sons, and Beverly embraced her role as a mother with complete devotion. She dedicated herself to raising her children, making their home a place of warmth and stability. But as the years passed and the boys grew more independent, something inside Beverly stirred. While she cherished motherhood, she felt a calling to build something of her own, a career, a purpose beyond the walls of her home. At first, she took a job as a receptionist. It was a start, a stepping stone, but the real spark came when she began learning about real estate. She studied hard and earned her license. Once she was officially a real estate agent, it became clear she had found her true calling. She threw herself into her work with passion and professionalism. Her clients adored her. She had a reputation for being warm, honest, and hardworking. Before long, she was one of the most trusted agents in the region. The job brought more than professional satisfaction. It also lifted the family's financial stress. They weren't wealthy, but they were secure. For Beverly, that meant the world. As their 20th wedding anniversary approached, Carl and Beverly decided to mark the occasion in a meaningful way. When they first married, they hadn't been able to afford much. So, this time, they celebrated properly, renewing their vows and hosting the kind of party they had once only dreamed of. It was a moment of joy, a reminder of how far they had come. But not all milestones in their journey were happy ones. In 2003, tragedy struck the Carter family. Their 19-year-old son, Christopher, died in a car accident. The grief was unbearable. Christopher had a wife and child of his own, and his sudden death left a hole in their lives that could never be filled. Beverly was especially devastated. To cope, she poured herself into her work even more. She also found healing in her grandchildren, whose presence helped her heart feel whole again. She never stopped being a loving mother and grandmother, and her strength carried the family forward through unimaginable sorrow. September 25, 2014 began like any ordinary Thursday. But for Beverly, the day held a small victory. She had won a friendly office contest and was rewarded with a $50 prize. She was in high spirits, eager to wrap up her day. There was one final property on her schedule, a house in Scott she was showing to a new set of clients. The appointment was for 6 p.m., and the buyers claimed they were ready to pay in cash, which would mean a fast, smooth transaction. Beverly was optimistic. She left the office around 5:30 p.m., smiling, confident, and energized. Before heading to the showing, she called Carl to let him know about the appointment. She gave him the address and promised to pick up dinner on the way home. Everything seemed normal, but as the hours passed, concern began to set in. By 9 p.m., Beverly still hadn't returned. Carl's calls went unanswered. He tried again and again, growing more anxious with each passing minute. One of Beverly's sons made his way to her office, hoping she might have returned there or left some kind of clue. Meanwhile, Carl drove straight to the property in Scott, her last known location. What he saw when he arrived sent a chill down his spine. Beverly's car was still parked in the driveway. As he approached, he immediately spotted her purse sitting visibly on the passenger seat. That alone raised alarm. Beverly, like most real estate agents, had strict safety habits. She never brought her personal items into unknown homes with strangers. It was a precaution she never overlooked. With his heart racing, Carl walked to the front door. It was wide open. Inside, the house was still. He stepped in, calling her name, but Beverly was nowhere to be found. He dialed his son immediately, but there was no sign of her at the office either. It had closed for the night, and the building was empty. That was enough. It was time to involve the police. When officers arrived at the scene, they took in everything with clinical precision, but something struck them as odd. Carl had entered the house before calling the authorities. In doing so, he had unknowingly left fingerprints and possibly other traces throughout the property, contaminating what could now be considered a potential crime scene. When Carl was brought in for questioning, he laid everything out. He spoke candidly about his past, the early days of their marriage, the mistakes he'd made, including his infidelity, and the one time he'd lashed out physically. But those events, he explained, were far behind them. He emphasized how much he loved Beverly, how far they'd come, and how deeply committed he was to finding her. His demeanor, his honesty, and his emotional distress gave officers the sense that he was not the man they were looking for. Just after 1 a.m., Carl received a text from Beverly's phone. It was brief and strange. According to the message, Beverly had spontaneously decided to go out for drinks with some friends, but everything about the text was wrong. The tone was off, the phrasing wasn't hers. And most importantly, Beverly didn't drink ever. He wasn't the only one receiving odd communications. Earlier during the search, Carl had reached out to two of Beverly's coworkers, hoping they might know something. Both women texted Beverly as well, trying to get a response. And like Carl, they felt something was off with the replies they received. One of them, suspecting foul play, used a private office code, a kind of silent alarm between coworkers. She sent a message asking Beverly if she had left a red folder on her desk. It was their way of asking, "Are you in danger?" But there was no reply. By morning, Beverly Carter's name was on everyone's lips. The police canvassed the neighborhood near the house where Beverly had gone missing. One neighbor mentioned seeing a suspicious figure the previous evening, a tall, thin white man with short, dark hair. He had emerged from a black car parked not on the driveway, but right on the front lawn of the vacant home. Investigators examined the lawn, and sure enough, there were fresh tire marks. It was a small but critical lead. Attention then turned to Beverly's work computer. Fortunately, a colleague knew her login credentials. Officers accessed her notes and quickly found the entry for her final appointment. The buyers she was scheduled to meet were listed as Steve and Crystal Adams. Their contact details, email, and phone number were also noted. But as the investigators dug deeper, they realized something troubling. The names were fake. The email address didn't exist, and the phone number wasn't a personal line. It was linked to an anonymous communication service. By reaching out to the service provider, police were able to track the origin of the communication. The digital breadcrumb led them to a name. Aaron Lewis, 33 years old, living in Jacksonville, just 15 miles from Scott. The officers didn't approach his home with guns drawn. They weren't ready to make an arrest. Not yet. First, they needed to confirm whether this man matched the neighbor's description, and if he did, perhaps he might lead them to Beverly. Their surveillance didn't take long to yield results. A tall, lean man with short, dark hair exited the house and got into a black Ford Fusion, matching the description perfectly. Detectives in an unmarked car began tailing him, but Aaron sensed he was being followed. He hit the gas, trying to shake the car behind him. The chase didn't last long. Pushing the vehicle too hard, he lost control and veered off the road, crashing into a ditch. The impact was violent. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt and slammed his head into the steering wheel, suffering facial injuries. He was pulled from the wreck and taken to the hospital for treatment. At first, authorities had no grounds to formally arrest Aaron Lewis. Without a warrant, their mission had been limited to surveillance, to quietly watch, gather information, and avoid confrontation. But after his failed escape and subsequent hospitalization, everything changed. Following his MRI and treatment for facial injuries, Aaron made an audacious move. Seizing the moment when he was unsupervised, he slipped out of the hospital, vanishing before officers could stop him. Just like that, the man at the center of a growing mystery was on the run. A full-scale manhunt began. Local television stations aired his photo from the accident scene. The face of Aaron Lewis was now burned into the minds of every viewer in the Little Rock and Scott area. It didn't take long before Aaron was spotted. Two office workers who had been discussing the case noticed a man at a bus stop who looked eerily similar to the fugitive. One of them approached under the pretense of asking about bus times, seizing the opportunity to study his face. There was no doubt in his mind it was Aaron Lewis. While the first man quietly contacted police, Aaron wandered off, unaware he'd been made. Hunger led him to a nearby Subway sandwich shop, but discretion wouldn't follow him there. Several customers recognized him immediately. Unlike the office workers, they weren't quiet. They pointed, they shouted, and panic spread. Realizing he'd been exposed, Aaron bolted. He sprinted from the store and ducked into a nearby building, desperate to hide. But it was too late. Police officers converged on the area within minutes. He was arrested without further incident. Back in custody, Aaron began crafting a defense. He denied any involvement in Beverly Carter's disappearance. According to his first story, he hadn't gone to the house alone. He claimed a friend had accompanied him and that at some point, Aaron stepped outside, leaving Beverly and the other man alone inside. Whatever had happened to her, he insisted, occurred after he left. But investigators quickly unraveled this claim. The man he named as his accomplice was a soldier stationed many miles away on the day of Beverly's disappearance. His alibi was ironclad. Multiple witnesses and phone logs confirmed he had not left his post. The story was a lie, and Aaron knew it. Still, he refused to say what really happened. Detectives tried a different approach. They pressed him for information, hoping he would finally reveal Beverly's location. Aaron remained vague, cryptic even. He hinted that she might still be alive, but only if she were found soon. He claimed she'd been left without food or water since his arrest, implying that time was running out. With hope still alive, Aaron agreed to lead investigators to two buildings where he claimed Beverly had been kept. They searched both thoroughly. She wasn't there. Once again, Aaron changed the story. Now he said someone else, an accomplice, must have moved her. With Aaron proving unreliable, investigators turned to his phone records. They traced his movements on the day Beverly disappeared, leading them to an abandoned concrete plant 25 miles from Scott, his former place of employment. It was a remote, bleak property. Officers began their search with heavy hearts, fearing what they might find. On September 30th, their fears were confirmed. In a shallow grave beneath loose dirt, they found her. The grave hadn't even been concealed properly. One of Beverly's elbows was still visible above the soil. Her body had been hastily buried, and when forensic examiners unwrapped the duct tape that covered her head, layer upon layer of it, the reality became unbearable. Beverly Carter had died from suffocation. She'd been wrapped so tightly she couldn't breathe. When police returned to Aaron Lewis with the truth that Beverly's body had been found, he changed his story once again. Now he claimed that he and Beverly had been having an affair after meeting through Craigslist. According to him, they had arranged a private meeting on the day of her death. But things went wrong during intimacy, resulting in a tragic accident. But that story made even less sense than the last. Beverly's family and friends knew her well. She was a professional, a devoted wife, and there was zero evidence of an affair. More damningly, the condition of her body, the duct tape mask, and the makeshift grave painted a very different picture. In his next version of events, Aaron shifted blame entirely. This time, he claimed it hadn't been him at all. He pointed fingers at his wife, Crystal. Supposedly, it was Crystal who had met with Beverly. And once again, something had gone wrong. Detectives weren't buying it, but they did take a closer look at Crystal Lowry. Her phone records told a story of their own. On the day Beverly vanished, Aaron had been in unusually frequent contact with her. That alone didn't prove involvement, but it was suspicious. Roughly a month after Beverly's disappearance, authorities arrested Crystal. The moment she was taken into custody, she broke. The 42-year-old confessed and told investigators everything. She and Aaron were still legally married, but the relationship had deteriorated. Though they lived in the same house, it was only because they couldn't afford to separate. Financial stress had created unbearable tension. They both wanted out, but they needed money to do it. That's when Aaron proposed a horrifying solution: kidnap someone wealthy and demand ransom. Crystal was hesitant, but she didn't say no. Aaron suggested they target a female real estate agent. They tended to drive nice cars, dress well, and most importantly, often worked alone. They looked online and found Beverly Carter, one of the most successful agents in the area. To them, she seemed like the perfect target. Aaron called her under a fake name, posing as a buyer relocating from out of state with his wife. He told Beverly they were looking for a quiet home near Little Rock. He even chose a listing in an isolated area, perfect for his plan. At first, Beverly refused to show the house. Her agency's policy prohibited private showings to solo men, especially in remote locations. When Aaron realized his scheme might fall apart, he quickly brought Crystal into the conversation. She got on the phone and confirmed she'd be at the showing too. Reassured, Beverly agreed to the meeting. The clients claimed they were prepared to pay in cash, something that always made agents take notice. But when the time came, only Aaron showed up. He apologized, saying his wife had been delayed. Beverly, ever professional, allowed the showing to proceed. It would be the last house she ever entered. The two toured the house together, beginning on the ground floor. But when they climbed the stairs to the first floor, everything changed. Aaron made his move. Without warning, he attacked Beverly. Weakened from recent plastic surgeries, including a tummy tuck, she had little strength to resist. He bound her hands with duct tape as she struggled in vain. He forced her into the trunk. He intended to hold Beverly for ransom, $100,000 in exchange for her life. The location he had in mind was a former workplace, an old abandoned building at a concrete plant 25 miles outside Scott. It seemed like the perfect spot to keep someone hidden. But Aaron had failed to do the most basic preparation. When he arrived, he realized the building was no longer abandoned, nor suitable for what he had in mind. There was no backup plan, no alternate location. And now he had a terrified woman locked in his trunk and nowhere to take her. Panicking, he turned to the only person who knew the plan, his wife. He snapped a photo of Beverly bound and terrified in the trunk and texted it to Crystal with a single word: help. Crystal was furious. She hadn't agreed to have the woman brought to their home, but by the time she returned from work, it was too late. Beverly was already there, locked inside their bathroom. The couple scrambled to figure out what to do next. Aaron had already recorded a message on his phone that Crystal was supposed to send to Beverly's husband. The idea was simple: make it sound like Beverly was speaking under duress, begging Carl not to call the police and to follow the kidnapper's instructions. But the message was never sent. It remained on Aaron's phone, just one more piece of evidence waiting to be discovered. Their original plan had been to force Carl to transfer the ransom to Beverly's bank account, then withdraw the funds using her debit cards. Erin even claimed to have her PIN numbers. But there was one problem. Beverly's cards were still in her purse, which he had left in the car during the kidnapping. Only now, too late, did he realize his mistake. He returned to the scene, hoping to retrieve the cards before anyone noticed something was wrong. But by then, the police had already arrived. Officers were combing the area. In a twist of cruel irony, one officer even stopped Erin as he drove past, mistaking him for a neighbor and casually asking if he'd seen anything suspicious. He played it cool, giving nothing away. Then he drove back home. There, things quickly spiraled further out of control. Crystal, thinking ahead, realized a new threat had emerged. Beverly had seen Erin's face, and now, locked in their bathroom, she could see prescription pill bottles with Crystal's name printed clearly on the labels. If Beverly survived, she could identify both of them. Releasing her was no longer an option. Crystal didn't want to carry out the act herself. She simply told Erin Beverly needed to be gone. And so, on a dark and final drive, Erin Lewis took Beverly from their home and transported her back toward the cement plant. There, with cold deliberation, he wrapped duct tape around her head over and over until she could no longer breathe. When her body went still, he buried her in a shallow grave. Crystal's confession eliminated the need for a lengthy trial. She pleaded guilty and received a 30-year sentence for her role in the crime. But Erin clung to his lies. When his trial began in 2016, he maintained his innocence, insisting that he had not intended to kill Beverly and that her death was an accident. The prosecution painted a different picture, presenting evidence of premeditation and the chilling details of the kidnapping. They highlighted the text messages between Erin and Crystal, the planning that had gone into the crime, and the lack of remorse shown by Erin during the investigation. Witnesses testified about Erin's behavior leading up to the crime, painting him as a man desperate for money and willing to do anything to escape his financial troubles. The jury deliberated for just a few hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Erin Lewis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Beverly Carter became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers that can lurk in seemingly ordinary situations. Her family and friends worked tirelessly to keep her memory alive, establishing a foundation in her name to help other families affected by violence. Beverly's story resonated with many, serving as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of community vigilance. As time passed, the community rallied around the Carters, holding vigils and events to honor Beverly's memory. Each year, they organized a charity walk, raising funds for domestic violence awareness and support services. The event became a symbol of hope and resilience, drawing participants from all walks of life who wanted to stand against violence and support those affected by it. Beverly's sons grew up with a renewed sense of purpose, inspired by their mother's strength and the love she had for her family. They often shared stories of her kindness and dedication, ensuring that her spirit lived on in their hearts. They also became advocates for mental health awareness, recognizing the importance of addressing emotional well-being in the wake of trauma. In the years following the tragedy, the real estate community also took significant steps to improve safety. Many agencies implemented training programs focused on personal safety, teaching agents how to recognize potential dangers and respond effectively. The industry began to prioritize the well-being of its members, fostering a culture of support and vigilance. Beverly's story served as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and community could shine through. Her legacy continued to inspire change, encouraging others to stand up against violence and work towards a safer future for everyone. The impact of her life and the tragedy of her loss resonated far beyond her immediate circle, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of many.